Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about efficiency. Efficiency. Pardon my chicken scratch. All right, so when we talk about efficiency, there's a couple of different ways we can talk about being efficient. One of them is technical. Technical efficiency. Technical efficiency, if you think back to one of our earliest discussions, draw me a picture of the U.S. economy, right? What did you draw? You drew firms, and we know that what do firms take in? They take in inputs, and what comes out, outputs, right? So if I'm a pizzeria, what's my output? Pizza. And what happens in here is production. So production is what firms do to inputs. Ooh, that's horrible. Inputs to make them outputs, okay? And technical efficiency addresses this. So technical efficiency is getting the greatest amount of output given a fixed number of inputs. And probably the best example of that is Henry Ford and the production line, right? Because if you looked at the output of Model Ts prior to him instituting his reforms with the production line, I have to look up the exact amount of output, but he was able to just increase it vastly given improvements in technical efficiency. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about economic efficiency. And economic efficiency is the production of goods and services that society most wants or most desired. And who's that defined by? Well, it's not the government, right? It's defined by, and I keep going back to this picture, but if you draw me a picture of the U.S. economy, we've got firms, government, and household, and we know that there's a multitude of relationship in terms of the exchange of stuff for money. But who decides what's best for society? It's primarily comes from the private sector, firms and households, right? We as members of a household, we as members of firms decide what gets produced, how it gets produced, and who gets to consume it. The government does weigh in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the government isn't absent from defining what's best for society, but it does largely come from the private sector. Now, what is best for society? The term I'll use is socially optimal. Optimal. What is socially optimal? What is best for society? And the easiest way to understand this, remember back when we talked about the production possibility curve, right? Here's what we learned about this. We learned that on a production possibility curve, anything inside the curve is can be produced, but is inefficient, right? There's something not going on, and is inefficient. Anything on the curve shows the trade-off between what can be produced, and so in this case, B and C show the trade-off, show an efficient production, and of course D can't be produced because there's not enough resources. It would take a change in resources or technology. But recall, the production possibility frontier or curve didn't tell us what was best for society. So it would be a trick question if I said, A, B, C, and D, which one's socially optimal? The answer is, trick question. That model doesn't answer that. What does answer what's socially optimal is where your marginal cost equals your marginal benefit. So let's talk a little bit about marginal cost and marginal benefit, all right? Very quickly, the easiest way to understand marginal benefit. So, marginal benefit. Marginal benefit. Marginal in economics means increment or unit. All right. So benefit, utility, satisfaction. What you're looking for is what is the utility or satisfaction from that next increment. And probably the easiest way to understand it is pizza, especially if you're hungry, right? Because if I allow this to be quantity right now, and I allow this just to be benefit, okay, we'll just label it benefit. Think of benefit, again, as the technical term is utility, but the easiest way to think about it is just satisfaction, right? Your level of satisfaction as a consumer. So for this first increment, so for that first piece of pizza that you eat, what is the benefit? Is it high or low? Well, for most people, especially if you're hungry, you bite into a piece of pizza and super high. Okay? What about the second piece? You're a little full now, so not. How about the third piece? What about the seventh piece of pizza? When you're, narfing down that seventh piece, is the benefit high or low? Well, for most people's case, it's going to be low, right? Because now you're getting full, and you even maybe uncomfortable eating 7 pieces of pizza. Well, that's what the benefit marginal benefit curve looks like, right? And the diminishing marginal utility states that the more you have of something, the less you value each additional increment, basically. So the more you have of something, the less you value each. It's not that you don't value it, right? You just value each additional increment less, given the more you have. And that's what it looks like, marginal benefit. Okay? Now, what does that look like? Demand? Yeah, so it's okay to think of a marginal benefit curve and a demand curve as being interchangeable or pretty much the same thing. If I change benefit to price, now watch what I can do. If I can ask, what is the marginal benefit of that first piece of pizza? And I can actually put, oh, that's horrible drawing. So I sorry about that. Here, let's try that again. There we go. What's the marginal benefit of the first increment or first quantity of pizza? It's $10. We can apply dollars and cents. Okay. Now, what about marginal cost? Marginal cost is similar in that it's the cost of the next increment of something. And honestly, I think marginal cost is sometimes difficult to wrap your mind around when you first start studying economics. The best way I can explain it is, let's say you rent a car every week to drive to school, okay? And the rental rates for cars are, well, we'll keep it simple. For a 2-seat car, a 2-seater, it's $100 a week. Let's say for a 4-seater car, it's $150. Okay, so there's a number of people, right? And here's the cost and the marginal cost. So if it's just you, what does it cost you for that first week? Well, you're going to get a 2-seater car, so it's going to be $100. And I mean, the marginal cost, well, the marginal cost, that first increment, that first week of you driving would be $100. Okay. Now, after the first week, what happens? There's a knock on the door. Hello, and it's your neighbor who says, "Hey, I know you drive into school every week. Can I ride along? Because my car just got stolen or something like that." And so you add a second increment, right? Your neighbor who's now going to drive with you. All right. So you go to rent the car for the week. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to rent the same car, so your cost that week is $100. But what was the additional cost of adding that next rider? 0, right? The marginal cost didn't cost you any more to add your neighbor in because you were going to spend that money anyway, and the marginal cost would be zero, right? Let's say, though, that the week after that, another knock on the door. Now it's the neighbor on the other side, and they want to ride, okay? And you, being gracious, say, okay, sure, that's fine. This week, you can't get the 2-seater car. What do you have to do? You got to get the 4-seater car, okay? So your cost now is going to be $150 that week to get all 3 of you to school. What's your marginal cost? What was the cost of adding that additional increment? Well, it's $50. You see how that works? You see how marginal cost is the cost of an additional unit or increment, and there you go, okay? Now, if I plot marginal cost out, I'll just cut to the chase. It looks like this. And I already erased the data, but if you look at the data, marginal cost increases as the quantity also increases, okay? Now, what does that look like? That looks a lot like a supply curve, right? And in fact, we can think of marginal cost curve or supply curves as the same. So again, I can say, what is the marginal cost of, say, the 5th increment or unit? And again, if I change this from cost to price and actually have dollar values out here, then I can say the marginal cost of that 5th increment is 20. All right, and finally, let's get back to what's socially optimal. If I combine the 2 curves, marginal benefit, marginal cost, there's where the magic happens, right? So it's at this point that is the answer to what is socially optimal, what is best for society. And you may think about it this way, okay? So at that first increment, I'll let green be benefit. What is the benefit of that first increment? Well, it's that much, right? What is the cost? Cost is only that much. So you're gonna do it? Heck yeah, you're gonna do it. All right, what about the second increment? Okay, so second increment, because so long as the benefit exceeds the cost, then generally, ceteris paribus, consumers will consume. So if the benefit's way up there and the cost is still lower, then yeah, we're gonna do it. Now, we got increment 3. In increment 3, the marginal benefit and the marginal cost are equal. That's what's socially optimal. And that's why it's socially optimal. Actually, here's the best way of understanding it. Because if you're thinking, well, that makes no sense, Mr. Dixon. I mean, because why wouldn't we just stop at the second increment? Why would we go all the way to the third increment? And here's why. The second increment's good because the benefit, is still higher than the cost. But if we stop at the second increment and we don't go all the way to where marginal cost equals marginal benefit, we lose all of that benefit. We lose all of that utility. And again, the goal of every consumer, right, is to maximize utility, to maximize that benefit. And that is why the answer to what is socially optimal is to where the point at which the marginal cost equals the marginal benefit.